I find the experiences of autistic women far more relatable and far more representative of my experience than those of autistic men. I mean, there's certainly, that's not a hard and fast difference, and there are autistic men that I do relate to and feel like their experience is like mine, but in general, my experience, the way I read women's experiences just sounds to me the way I feel. And so I've been looking for ways to explore that a little further, and I noticed that in the book Autism in Heels by Jennifer Cook, credited Jennifer Cook O'Toole, but she's going by Jennifer Cook now, she has what she calls the Chick List Checklist, a portrait of women, girls, and our unique autism style. And so I've gone through this list. Some of them really ring bells for me, some of them don't at all. I'm just addressing a bunch of her points and how they seem to correspond to me. The first one, women and girls are more apt to find less detectable ways to limit or avoid eye contact. I'm still kind of figuring out my relationship to eye contact. I never thought of it as something that I couldn't do, but since I've been learning about autism and other forms of neurodivergence and the effect that eye contact can have on people, I've been intentionally doing less of it. Like, I'll look up at people and then look away and just not try to make constant contact, and that's sort of what they're talking about here, except more, finding like another point to look at makes it look like you're looking them in the eye. There's some others in here that didn't really ring bells for me, but that's just, unlike our male counterparts, it's the level of intensity and almost professorial knowledge about our special interest, rather than the interests themselves, that set us apart from neurotypical peers. And that's an interesting thing for me to think about. I certainly am, it's pleasant to think that I have an intense and almost professorial knowledge of subjects that I'm interested in. Like it says, do the interests themselves, do they set me apart from neurotypical peers? As one of my friends mentioned, some of the things that I've obsessed about over the years, especially when I was young, for example, music. That's a very common thing for young people to be into. I like to think that I'm more into the lore and background of it than some people, but it's really hard to compare that kind of thing. She lists a variety of timeline of what she calls frequent passions or special interests among women. Some of them, like Disney, is totally not my thing. Others, interesting, she says, the first she lists is genealogy and timelines. And that makes me think of a few different things. One is that I frequently say that numbers mean nothing to me, and I don't remember numbers, except the one thing I can remember is years. And often specific years. Sometimes it's just sort of roughly on the timeline. I like, if someone names something or someone from history, I like knowing that I can sort of place them, at least in a century, and because I can sort of visualize the scope of history over time that way. And genealogy is interesting because I'm really not very interested in my own family's genealogy. I mean, I've picked up some little bits of it from family members who do that, and some of it's kind of interesting, but not interesting enough for me to do it. But I really enjoy the genealogies of things I'm interested in the sense that I don't just want to listen to a band. I like to know that, this band was influenced by so-and-so who, you wouldn't have had without someone else, or this band brought together members from previous bands. I don't know if you've seen the rock and roll family trees that have been generated for different scenes and bands and that kind of thing. Those have always been really interesting to me, both to see how the bands relate to each other and people move from one band to each other and that kind of thing, but also as an information visualization technique. It's really interesting to me to see how you can see a lot of different relationships in time and between bands and people represented, on a piece of paper or a two-dimensional screen. History, an interest of mine. Literature and literary figures, that's definitely the case. I was a comparative literature major and have always been, fascinated before and after that. Language, animals, very much so. Anime and fashion, not so much. Music, definitely, as I mentioned before. And theater, I haven't been involved in the creation of plays, theatrical events, since I did school plays in elementary school, but I used to review plays regularly. It's definitely something that is of interest. An interesting thing, people on the spectrum are much more likely to experience synesthesia, and so girls are 3 times more likely to be synesthetes. I definitely have synesthesia envy, I would say. It's a fascinating topic to me. I would definitely say I don't have the kind of what you think of as sort of a classical synesthesia, like the letter B is blue to someone, the number 3 is yellow or female, or I don't have those kind of correspondences that people do, but there are other ways that I feel there's sort of sensory interaction. I can sort of I can easily intentionally visualize music, like if I'm listening to music, close my eyes and sort of visualize geometric forms and things like that very easily. Other things, like one of my stims that I do is rubbing my tongue on my teeth, and sometimes it's just skin on surface kind of friction and pressure stim, like you could do in a number of ways, but I don't know if it's because I'm actually physically stimulating taste buds in the process, but I feel like I get a sort of sensation that's more than touch. It's like a combination of touch and taste almost. It's something to really think about. She talks about gender identity, and that women who are autistic are more likely to exhibit androgyny, gender fluidity, things like that. I'm pretty male. I'm not female, I'm not trans, I'm not non-binary, but at the same time my version of male is not every man's version of male. As I've said on Twitter recently, I'm male, but I'm not terribly enthusiastic about it. I just sort of do my thing, and that generally fits into a sort of male template, but you'll never hear me saying, oh, I'm going to do this because that's what a man does. That's the manly thing to do. A man should do blah, blah, blah. And thinking that way, works for some people. It can be toxic for some people, but it can be healthy and just work for some people. But that's not me. She talked about scripting from favorite TV shows, books, plays, and movies. This is one of the idea that she touches on this in other places, which is a fairly common thing, is people using stories, television, etc., books, etc., to learn how to be, sort of learn how to be a person, how to interact, how to be social, how to relate to other people. That's a hard one. I generally haven't said to myself, oh, I'm going to read this book to learn how to be a person, interact, whatever. But that's how I've used it, even if I didn't tell myself that's how I was using it. It's talking about, copying dialogue, learning and copying dialogue from movies and things. I don't necessarily, I kind of do. I mean, I like quotes and memes and callbacks. I'm always, like, my wife and I are frequently, we'll just drop lines from Arrested Development or South Park or other things that we've been watching, that certain lines, certain bits of stories are just sticky, as people like Seth Godin said in that sort of circa 2000 boom of new media marketing and that kind of thing. certain shows and movies, especially shows, just because there's so much more time involved with these characters, but there are examples and quotes and things that just really, it's specific to the thing that they're to their context, but they also seem widely applicable. And I mean, it's the same tradition as, when you would quote Shakespeare. If you're in a situation where something seems metaphorically rotten, something is corrupt or broken, you'd say, oh, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. And it's very much that same phenomenon. And sometimes I will do it with sort of older high culture things like that. Often it's more recent things. And some things just work better than that for others. Like, it's funny, I was just trying to think of something that I wouldn't quote like that. And we just watched the most recent episode of Billions, which came to my mind as something that I wouldn't quote like that. But part of that is that show is so... the characters on that show are always doing that. They're always, mentioning little bits of, things from movies and sports, and, plays double meanings. If you're familiar with the references, you understand what they're saying. And also and it says something about the characters that person is quoting that coach or film or whatever. And so they do that a lot, and it means that they're playing with all these they're kind of sampling all these pre-existing works, and the way one of the things I think is interesting is the way audience members react. Everyone will have a slightly different reaction, not just because we're all different people with different life experiences, but those different life experiences include different works of art and entertainment and sports and other culture we've been exposed to or care about in our lives. So let's say a given episode of Billions has 20 little references, Easter eggs, allusions, whatever you want to call them. Maybe I'll get 5 of them. Maybe I'll get 10 of them. Someone else will get a different 10. Some will only get a few, but they may be ones that are crucial to the story. So I just think it's interesting when you like I said earlier, people will always have different reactions to the same work of art or entertainment, but it sort of adds another layer when it's rich with callbacks to other cultural things. And I've been going for over 15 minutes, so I'm going to leave it for there and come back to this another time.